I need to do something with myself that isn't drawing, so instead I'll reach back into the bottomless pit that is yapping about William Afton. That's right, baby, we're doing a Springtrap design tier list. I've got a lineup of Springtrap designs to pit against each other and see where they rank. Before we start, here's my basic criteria for what's included and how I rank them. No plush traps. I don't care that much about Plushtrap. He's a little guy. I have nothing interesting to say about him or his small pool of variants. No books or graphic novels. I thought about including them, but I felt it would crowd the list a little too much since they'd all slot into the mid tiers without much comment. No Human Williams or Purple Guy sprites. Do you expect me to try and rank Matthew Lillard's actual face against this thing? We need a fair competition here. Purple Guy sprites are, well, little purple silhouettes. They've got a completely different niche to actual character designs. No troll games or fan games, just mainline games and core spin-offs. I'm not including Fury's Rage Scraptrap background Easter egg within these ranks, and fan games would unleash an entire Pandora's box of extra Springtraps that I don't feel like talking about. The basis for how I evaluate each Springtrap is primarily based on their design specifically. However, their execution in practice and my interpretation of their lore will factor into them if I feel it's relevant. This isn't hard math though, the true deciding factor is just my overall vibe check of how much I like them. There's no objective best Springtrap rankings, so I'm not trying to feign one. Feel free to do your own rankings too. I'm sure the comments will have perfectly civil discussions about this multi-rabbit's aesthetics. With all that out of the way, let's get right into it.
I sense Count Dooku.
I sense a trap.
Next move?
Spring the trap.
The blueprint, the gold standard for all other Springtraps to meet. He's not perfect, but he is him. This one animatronic irreparably changed my brain chemistry at the formative age of 12 years old, and I have still not recovered over 10 years since. It's near impossible for me to really have a grasp on just how significant this one character is to the entire trajectory of my life up to this point. So let's not dwell on it, or I might have an existential crisis. In short, I like Springtrap more than any human being reasonably should. Now I'll try to talk about him with a mask of normalcy. I think one of the things that has made this original model of Springtrap stand the test of time, even when compared to the later iterations of his FNAF 3 design, is how he looks specifically in Scott Cawthon's art style. Since FNAF 3 is a fully pre-rendered game, the individual shots of Springtrap are just as important as the model itself. These renders are all just really good. The way Springtrap is positioned, the way the lighting hits him, the deep shadows cast, the overall color of him in FNAF 3, everything comes together to make him feel more alive than he should, and your mind just automatically fills in the gaps of what he actually looks like. Getting a good look at his corpse obviously shows its shortcomings far more, but for what it's meant to convey in practice, it feels much more gruesome than it actually is. FNAF 3 Springtrap is genuinely lightning in a bottle, especially impressive given Scott's comments about him just kinda coming together without any sort of conceptualization process.
How did you think of Springtrap?
I don't know. Once again, he was just the character for that game. I did not sketch out a whole bunch of characters and write pros and cons lists. You know, he was just the natural. He was just the natural villain for that. You know, I knew what the villain was supposed to be, and I just kind of started modeling him, and he just kind of came together.
At the time, he was a shocking and fresh design, and even now he still holds up among the countless ranks of FNAF designs as a whole, against every iteration of William Afton since, and is now considered by many as one of the greats in the entire horror genre. Not much more I can say. Springtrap's design just kinda speaks for itself. Obvious S tier, firmly in the top spot. Let's see how the direct iterations of this design stack up in comparison.
Yeah, Purple Guy, he's in there.
This one gets a bad rap, and well, yeah, you can see why. He's very rough around the edges, but in his defense, he was made for completely different conditions than the original. Help Wanted is a VR game, and all of the character models needed to be optimized to work smoothly for the technology available in 2019. Additionally, when you see this Springtrap in-game, you're not thinking about how low poly he is or how his corpse got totally gutted. You're seeing him move, you're watching a much more zombie-like portrayal of the character come for you in VR, and that experience makes up for the lacking graphical fidelity in the model itself. That being said, there are some gripes I have with the model aside from his technical limitations. His color palette and overall texture work feel very half-baked. He's kind of a weird, light greenish yellow. His iconic silver eyes are swapped out for less haunting green ones. And what's left of his corpse is either made a rust brown, or in the case of his head, purple. A fun callback to Purple Guy, maybe, but big leagues this is not. Given the lore context of Help Wanted being an in-universe imitation of the real events of FNAF's world, it's entirely possible some of these decisions were purposeful distinctions for that concept. But they're still not my preference, and I don't know if that's the intention, so it doesn't save him. For what he accomplishes though, I think Help Wanted Springtrap is a good B tier.
Vanessa! Vanessa! Alright, party's over! I've had it up to here with you, me's. You know, I'm really getting sick of the sound of my own voice.
This version of Springtrap is probably the highest quality version of the Scott model we will ever have in our hands. Thanks to FNAF AR not needing to compromise the models nearly as much as Help Wanted had to, Springtrap got to retain all of its more intricate details. What sets this one apart from the others is his texture work. While the Help Wanted model doesn't have much of a discernible material, the AR model looks like moist, moldy fur. Ironically, the Springtrap in context is actually shiny painted metal, given that it chips off when you send them off to people's houses. Because of this, I think it makes his texture work especially neat, since it's able to come across as wet fabric and shiny paint without feeling out of place in either context. The main thing I dislike about this version of Springtrap is that they altered the positioning of his jaw. This was done for it to accentuate the metal bar in his mask and allow for more exaggerated movement with his mouth in-game, but this comes with the downside of throwing off the vibe of his overall head shape. It's not especially noticeable if you're not paying attention, but you can really tell when comparing it to the Help Wanted model, which retained the original jaw position. All that said though, AR Springtrap is really good for what it needs to be, and allows us the closest we'll get to having Scott's original model for ourselves. A tier.
Pizza time!
Now this is the cream of the crop. Easily, this is the best version of Springtrap's design since the original in FNAF 3. Setting it apart from the versions in Help Wanted and FNAF AR is that Dead by Daylight's Springtrap is completely remade from the ground up. Because of that, it gives this version of the character a fully unique energy all to itself, while still capturing the core essence of Springtrap's design. It has more realistic proportions than the Scott design, reimagining the suit and endoskeleton to look more believable as a practical design, while still feeling larger than life than what would be possible in a fully practical suit. The texture work does a great job as well, making the fabric moldy and bloody, and the endoskeleton just as bloody with a good amount of rust as well. One of the biggest highlights of DBD Springtrap, though, is Afton's corpse within the suit. This is the first time we've gotten a fully modeled body inside of a Springtrap rather than a more abstract collection of human bits and pieces, and it is perfectly gruesome. You can see how his legs have been pulled from his hips, his hands completely severed from his wrists, and when he screams at you in-game, you get a great look at his appropriately gnarly face. It's genuinely uncomfortable to look at, which is perfectly suited for a more adult-oriented take on the design. Despite his more horrific detailing compared to the Springtraps we're used to, DBD Springtrap is also surprisingly vibrant. He has a very nicely saturated green color, bright red and blue wires, and his body's red really pops. And while this isn't part of his design, his voice lines in the game really highlight how equally vibrant William's personality is.
I'm back! Watch the show, everyone! I'm so sorry, I'm the fun one!
He's theatrical, he's thrilled to do what he does, and he's kind of a total dork. Having a character look so battered and horrific while acting so whimsical is such a fun contrast, especially given that his corpse has a giant smile. His animations are especially interesting, as they again contrast his decrepit appearance with impossibly smooth movement, which is ripped straight from the limited glimpses we got of his animations in FNAF 3. The one thing about this model that pretty much everyone has complained about is the fact that he is missing his darker green accents and button. Some people have made edits to include these features, and while it is a nice touch, I'm honestly surprised by the fact it doesn't really feel too incomplete without them. Even still, that extra bit of detail could have really made this the definitive best Springtrap for a lot of people. For me, he's close, but the only thing going against him is that he isn't the original version. This remake can only be as good as it is because of the source material, so I think it's important to give the original Springtrap its dues. But Dead by Daylight's is an extremely close second. It's a near flawless version of Springtrap to finally bring him out on center stage alongside his fellow horror icons. S tier.
Are you okay? You seem pretty out of it.
He's cute, he's a little gremlin, and he's a good enough translation of Springtrap into Scott's more cutesy style for FNaF World. I just wish he had more faithful details to the original Springtrap. C tier.
Hey guys, I hope we all have a fun game, no matter who ends up winning.
I want to kill that guy.
5 Laps at Freddy's just has a hard time. I don't want to be harsh to it, but I don't like 5 Lap Springtrap very much. It's the little things that kinda just ruin it for me. He does have all the right details and colors and everything, but the overall approach for spinning Springtrap into the 5 Laps art style just doesn't really sit right with me. He's not smiling, and the intent for him was directly that he isn't happy to be part of a kart racer. Something I feel is a total miss for the character whose snazzy purple car minigame seems to be a core inspiration for 5 Laps. If he was designed to look absolutely thrilled to smoke his competition in his midnight motor, I think this would have hit for me a lot better. I just don't dig his attitude, I don't like his face shape, and I don't really like the semi-buff angle for his body type. When William Afton is already as bombastic and thrilled to cause problems as he is, I'd expect a cartoon version of him to amplify that tenfold rather than make him a little grump. The scrapped expressions for him are a bit better of a showcase than his model and current icons, but I think I'd only really be satisfied with the wholly different approach. It's a worthwhile attempt, but he lands in D tier for me.
Don't be intimidated, Squidward. Try to imagine him in his underwear. Oh no, he's hot!
Alright now, I like Dark Springtrap. He's a fun little trivia character, but let's be real. This guy's a catfish, plain and simple. He showed up for exactly 1 second in Sister Location to tease Afton's return, and then appeared in FNAF 6 as Scraptrap instead. He has exactly 2 visibly missing pieces, and given that Scott has accidentally removed random pieces of his other models, it is entirely possible that Dark Springtrap was intended to look the exact same as normal Springtrap. He's only got the dark attribute in merch, otherwise it's just the cutscene sliding. I will not spare you, Dark Springtrap. You're a funny little guy, and that's all he'll ever be. D tier by default. It'd be an insult to put him over any actual reinterpretations of Springtrap. But, you know, if he ever got used in the future, that'd be a great time to give him a more purposeful makeover. I'd like to see a game with him.
Return the slab.
What?
Return the slab, or suffer my curse.
So, I've talked about this guy at length twice before on this channel, but that was years ago now and I don't remember anything I said, so here are my current thoughts on him. There is no way for me to talk about him without sounding crazy, so let's just get into it. Scraptrap has the very unique trait of being the only true Springtrap variant created by Scott Cawthon directly. Obviously there's also like Plushtrap and the adventure designs, but this is William Afton, so much so that the character's canon name is exclusively William Afton. Scraptrap has been used officially very infrequently, since the fandom just calls him that, but the intention is clear that this is meant to be William, the human man, more so than he is supposed to be Springtrap. I'll only briefly touch on the books for this entry specifically since it's relevant, but Pizzeria Simulator released a little before The Fourth Closet, which featured William removing himself to the best of his abilities from the original Springtrap in an effort to recreate himself and escape his slowly approaching death. Looking at Scraptrap as a mirror to that concept, I think it makes a lot more sense as to why Scott approached the design the way he did. While Springtrap has a clear focus on the concept of spring locks and a person mutilated within the animatronic, Scraptrap's focus leans on solely the human. Whatever William was up to between FNAF 3 and FNAF 6, he looks to have tried to do something to himself. Maybe he removed the endoskeleton, maybe he tried to reconstruct his face, cobble together a suit after the previous one got damaged, but we don't know. What we do know is that whatever happened to him, he ended up looking like this. He's got skin on his face and remaining arm, but his missing one and his legs are nothing but bone and clumps of flesh. And alongside the general difference between him and Springtrap's overall aesthetic, it sets him apart from the other animatronics in Pizza Sim as well. While Scrap Baby put herself together into a stylish, deadly monster, Ennard came undone and formed into Molten Freddy, and the puppet was trapped within Lefty, Afton sits among them all quietly. He's the least physically imposing of the entire group, but he also seems to be the most aware of his surroundings and of himself. Kinda. When he speaks, he composes himself very formally, constantly musing about the situation that has been wrought because of him, treating Henry's trap like a narrative to be appreciated. When killing his own son, his reaction ranges from boastful to almost disappointed. I don't think it's really stated enough just how integral Scraptrap was to actually establishing William Afton for the broader community. This is the first time we heard his voice post-springlocking, the first time we had a grasp on his uninhibited personality in the games, and the first instance of what would become the man's catchphrase.
I always come back.
There's an incredibly good video by Bonkbon that analyzes William's dialogue in Pizza Sim to greater detail, so I recommend giving that a watch since I can't dwell on this too long. All that to say, I think Scraptrap was made with a lot of thought behind conveying a story and showcasing what set him apart from the other characters. But, you know, he's still very ugly. But that's the point, I think. This is Afton at his most unflattering. He doesn't get to be on his power high anymore. He might even know that whatever happens to him next won't change what he's already got coming to him. How he looks in Pizza Sim itself is kind of a toss-up. The general quality of that game's visuals are hit or miss for me. But when he looks good, he looks really good. The salvage scenes in his finale render are lit so well. The LOA render looks really nice, and much like Springtrap, I think the game's assets are just as important as the model itself. However, the actual jump scare animations, the best opportunity to see him up close, do a pretty terrible job of selling his look. This is an issue I have with all of the jump scare animations, but Scraptrap especially suffers the most from their quality. If FNaF 6 had featured actual camera renders where we got to see Afton in his environment like FNaF 3, I wonder if the general consensus on him would have been more favorable. His design is just generally a tough sell already, but I think the lack of any real shots of him really tanked his potential more than anything. But going back to what I said earlier, this is the only true variant of Springtrap that Scott ever made. Because of that, Scraptrap has the unique factor of once again being in Scott's art style rather than the more professional approaches for all future variants of the character. And honestly, I don't think I ever really appreciated that angle. Scraptrap is the only time you get a good look at a Scott human in any of the FNaF games. The human head is far more exposed than Springtrap's ever was, and the old runaround of trying to say some kind of bizarre skull or mummy or whatever feels like I just missed the obvious point. That's just William. That's just his face. It's not realistic at all, it's incredibly silly. But I think it's cool that we got it, if that makes sense. Talking about just his suit, I still do not care what anyone says. This is not the same suit as Springtrap. It's just not. Look at it. Come on. He's got a blocky muzzle, his body's far skinnier, and he's got feet again. Instead of a scar over his right eye, it instead has a drooping eyelid and a wire running in front of the socket. His eyes themselves are nothing to write home about, just metal balls with pupils. But on the other hand, it does give him a more lifeless quality that glowing eyes wouldn't have. Looking at Scraptrap overall, I think it's just a matter of if you're down for his vibe despite the hiccups. Having tried to rework his design multiple times, I have just come to the conclusion that I like him as is, unchanged. I will say this, if we ever see Scraptrap again, I think it'd be a pretty obvious improvement if we got a professional take on him. I would love to see how the Dead by Daylight team approaches him, if they were to ever try adding him as a skin. But for what he is, and what he represents, for me, he's S tier. I just really, really like him. You may think me a fool, but you probably wanted to see me rank him up top. So, moving on.
What is that thing? Kids Cove.
I have good news, and I have bad news. The bad news, it's been nearly 4 years since Security Breach released, and Burntrap is still a total fraud. The good news is, this is a tier list where proper execution is only a factor if I want it to be. In his case, he was very uniquely botched, and if I ranked him on just a how well do they utilize the Springtrap basis, he'd be right smack at the bottom. Before I move on to his actual design, I will bring up what Scott Cawthon has said about what Burntrap was supposed to be, as I feel like that's necessary context to weigh in on how his design was approached.
I think in this case, it's okay. When it comes to Burntrap, originally, Burntrap was never supposed to move. He was supposed to just be something you saw in the corners, or like if you were walking past machinery, you might be able to peek in between two things and see him in the corner or propped up against a wall, almost like a some kind of decaying movie prop, and you never fully understood what his purpose was. And he had a very specific purpose, and I'm not going to say what that purpose was, but realistically, he never moved. Well, obviously that's not what we got in Security Breach. In Security Breach, we got a capsule opening and purple smoke flowing out and him climbing out and coming to get you.
So, having that in mind, my general takeaway of Burntrap's original concept, combined with Ruin's attempt at course correction, leads me to believe that he was effectively meant to be a sort of nightmare Springtrap. From what we know now, Burntrap seems to have only existed as an entity within Gregory's mind, and I think it very nicely contextualizes just how warped he looks. Burntrap's body is significantly larger and more exaggerated than Springtrap and Scraptrap's were, and his skull looks formed into the mask rather than it resembling anything close to an actual human. Before we knew the intention of the character, my belief was that Afton was physically regrowing into a monstrous version of himself over this endoskeleton. But with the clues given, I don't think it's meant to be taken as literally. He's stretched, huge, twisted, and he's genuinely really cool looking. When Security Breach first launched, I did not view him nearly as favorably as I do now. At first glance, he just felt like another basic take on a more withered Springtrap with a missing jaw like Ignited Springtrap from Joy of Creation. But you know, you can just look at him and realize that way more effort and care went into it than it seems. He's got a pretty simple design, all things considered, but to me it just works. And if we had actually gotten to see him the way we were meant to, as this hiding phantom tucked right out of our line of sight, I think everyone would have really liked him as much as I've grown to. That being said, the biggest upside to how Burntrap was included in Security Breach is his animations. The way his body rattles, the way he struggles to breathe. He feels like a near-total monster, yet still tethered to his fizzling humanity. Still persisting, still clawing his way back to life. Even if it doesn't work out for long. I really hope we get to see Burntrap again, as a skin in Dead by Daylight, as an inclusion in a spin-off game, or maybe even as his original gimmick in a future mainline FNaF game. Cause with what we have now, I think he's a clear S tier, despite it all.
Huh? You wanna know if I think it's a mimic? Of course not. They're both right there.
But it's becoming increasingly obvious. I can deny it no longer. I am small.
This one's got the privilege of being the first official 3D depiction of Springbonnie in the series. He's got fruity little eyelashes and big green eyes, the latter of which hasn't appeared in any designs of the character since World. He's got a funky face though, and the nature of being a chibi version of the suit naturally lands him a little lower than his larger, scarier counterparts. A good first outing, just nothing spectacular. B tier.
We still need to find out where Nutso went before we can rest easy.
I'm right behind you, aren't I?
Although not an actual model of him, the single glimpse of Springbonnie we received in Pizzeria Simulator was chilling in the best way possible. Seeing him loom behind Susie with his human eyes peeking through the mask's empty sockets was a great moment. It's also the only time we've gotten to see William's real eyes look through instead of the space being filled by animatronic eyes in FNaF World and future iterations of the character. It also kind of mirrors Golden Freddy's pinprick glowing eyes in FNaF 1. The overall design is exactly what you'd expect, and that expectation is good. Nothing much to say. A tier. For the most part, it's pretty much exactly how Springbonnie would look. The mask being slightly oversized, coupled with his desaturated colors, bring him down for me though. That being said, and this is just cheating a little, but modding him into Help Wanted to see how he looks in Glitchtrap's place is a nice little showcase of how he'd actually look in practice. Also, he was lost media for a long time, so the fact that people managed to find this model is really cool. B tier. This guy is awesome, although he doesn't really retain one consistent design throughout Into the Pit. That turns his vibe into that of this ever-shifting, almost amorphous beast. Springbonnie is the most monstrous version of Springtrap we'll probably ever see, and the way he looks and behaves is so chaotic and scary compared to the other forms of the character. His behavior in Into the Pit feels like a monster echoing the actions of its real counterpart, but with no attempts of disguising himself the way William did in 1985. It tries to speak like William, but it's inhuman and garbled. It doesn't share William's motives, it just has a primal bloodlust. Also, its scream is gnarly. The Super Nintendo style of Into the Pit genuinely feels like the only way Springbonnie could be as effective as he is. It leaves so much to the imagination, and again, he never quite looks the same each time you see him. Chances are he just didn't have a model sheet for the animators to reference, but for me, that gives him a more raw, unfiltered look that a more consistent design couldn't accomplish. He feels authentic, and he feels scary. Top of A tier.
And shame on the network that puts this junk on the air.
Peter, maybe you shouldn't say anything bad about the network.
Oh, why? What are they gonna do? Cut our budget? I wanna go get a beer.
He's alright for his brief appearance in Secret of the Mimic. I enjoy that he matches his respective Fredbear, and it's really cool that you actually look through the mouth like in FNaF 4's minigames. But I don't like his look at all. He's just very unappealing looking, especially in comparison to the other Springlock suits in the game. Additionally, since he's just an empty suit with no William or adjacent creature in sight, he just naturally falls into D tier for me. Nothing personal, he just wasn't built for this competition. It's okay, buddy. You're still a Springtrap to me. So, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie had a lot piled on its plate. It had to establish the world, the lore, the characters, and tie it all together into a 2-hour package after a near decade of production hell. Although the movie is meant to be an adaptation of the first game, there is a significant elephant in the room. The first FNaF game didn't really have William Afton, and now, given his status as the main antagonist of the entire franchise, he's a requirement to feature in this story. So how do you work him into this era of the story? What should he look like? How should he be introduced? And how do you ensure people can be satisfied with him, even in the event that a sequel may never get produced? The approach that was taken was to take Springbonnie, wither him just enough to look like Springtrap, and give us a half-and-half midway point for Afton's suit to provide an era-appropriate design that still looks recognizably like Springtrap. And I love this idea. And for the most part, this was executed wonderfully. Afton did not get to appear for very long in the film, but when it finally reached his entrance on night 5, I was elated to see him. His mere presence stole the show, and the way he moved, the way he was lit, everything came together to make him feel as imposing as he could. For an old guy running victory laps before failing to kill the one guy he was fixated on. The Yellow Rabbit did not necessarily accomplish all too much, and his death to become Springtrap did not have a whole lot of build-up. But what they managed to do with him in the time they had, I think was a well and good introduction of him to a general audience. He's a showboaty chatterbox, he gets to kick a full-grown man around like nobody's business, and he stabs his own daughter just for her calling him bad at math. And for shooting him too, I guess. As for how his actual suit looks, again, I really like it. The yellow and purple pop very nicely, he's got his FNaF 3 eyes, I enjoy his larger top button, and I think his gloves almost being like gauntlets was a very fun way to adapt Springtrap's hands into something wearable and functional. However, I have grown to like it a little less as time has gone on. It's not bad by any means, but I feel like the way it was done makes it feel too much like an empty costume and not enough like a full-on Springlock suit. The sound design makes up a little for it, but the lack of any visible endoskeleton pieces and the joint sore is withering makes it feel like it's missing something. Granted, you get to see his endoskeleton's ribs when Cupcake chews off a piece of his stomach, but a green-screened hole can't really fix the problem for me. I imagine the main reason for omitting it was because it would make his big suit that much more cumbersome for Matthew Lillard to wear and move in, but it still bothers me a little bit anyway. Aside from that, I feel like his mask could have been done a little better. It looks very good, don't get me wrong, but I think his jaw being a still fixture on the head, with the mouth shape being a little off, throws it off just enough to not feel as good as it could. Also, his eyes are just kinda locked in a sad-looking expression. All of these are nitpicks really, but I think if the suit had just a little more oomph to it, it could have been one of his very best looks. As is, I think it's very solid, and I appreciate it so much for giving me immediate Afton gratification for the first movie, but it isn't quite as special to me as the others. I thought a lot about whether or not I wanted him in S or A tier, but my gut says I want him in A. The gap between them is very small, but I like everyone in S just a little bit more.
I'm gonna be brutally honest with you here, Troop. Given this is just concept art, your meme options are gonna be extremely limited.
I will take anything. Any meme you got.
I get that part. It's just, you know, it's not that funny.
This one's interesting. Unfortunately, the only image we have of Movie Afton's concept art is a leaked photo and not an official release, so it's very difficult to see the intricate details. I mainly include this for the sake of comparing the withering here to how it was approached in the final costume. I think if they had kept the more overtly damaged holes and wires on the withered half of the suit, that could have presented a good opportunity to show the springlock endoskeleton inside Springbonnie without inhibiting the joints. Other than that, though, there isn't too much to say about this. The proportions look a little whack, and his eyes aren't as accurate to Springtrap as the final suits are. But for concept art, I still think this is a good look, and I'm gonna slot him in B tier. I would love to see an art book for the FNaF movie that includes this stuff.
What is that? It's the end of...
So, take the problems with the actual suit in the film, multiply them, and you've got the Halloween Horror Nights version of Springtrap. He's got a weird grimace that reminds me of Funko Springtrap more than the movie mask, and he's weirdly skinny compared to the bulkier costume he had before. I won't be too mean to him though, as he serves his purpose perfectly for the haunted house he's in, and was likely made in a much shorter span of time than the one on the big screen. B tier.
Every night at dinner, I'll be there. Every birthday party, I'll be there. Every Christmas, I'll be there.
It's hard to say for certainty what I think of this version of Springbonnie, since the second FNaF movie has yet to release as of this video, but the few glimpses of him we've seen make him look very nice. I personally like his blue eyes and more prominent buck teeth a lot though. All that said, I have a hunch that I will really like how he looks and how he's utilized once we get a full look at him. A tier.
William Afton is so cool. I wish he was real.
Who wants to play Dark World?
I don't think there's been any FNaF character to have set the community in as much of an unadulterated hype frenzy as Glitchtrap did. For good reason. At the time of Help Wanted's release, something like Glitchtrap was a completely unexpected surprise, especially given that nobody anticipated a major lore development with what we thought was just a VR adaptation of the original games. Unlike every other animatronic in the series, Glitchtrap was entirely new, entirely his own beast. A design that could only exist in the unique conditions of Help Wanted being developed by a studio instead of Scott Cawthon. He's a fully non-animatronic suit. He's stitched together for a human to wear, and he moves accordingly. He moves a little too much like a human. It really felt like there was a man in there, a man that we had thought was dead and buried. Yet there he was, back once again. His suit has crude stitches along his joints and accents. He has purple eyes and a starry purple vest, a feature that had never been part of Springbonnie before he arrived, and his face was all one unmoving mask, perpetually smiling, perpetually staring through you with emotionless eyes. Additionally, streaming down from his eyes and mouth are tear tracks and drool. It evokes the same kind of idea that the FNaF 1 newspapers introduced, the animatronics leaking blood and mucus, but now we can see that concept showcased, to a less extreme extent, on Glitchtrap. If this was all there was to him, I think I'd actually feel better about him than I actually do. I still love him, don't get me wrong, but I feel like that sensation of seeing this guy in VR acting like an actual man in a suit feels a little diluted when you know there isn't actually anything behind that mask. He is canonically just a digital entity, not a real costume performer, and from what we know, there wasn't any point where William would have used a suit like this for murders instead of the true Springbonnie. This doesn't drag him down that much, since his overall concept is still very fun, but I think it numbs the effectiveness just a bit. Glitchtrap also suffered a lot from feeling like a big promise for the new games, just to never really be used again. Security Breach replaced him with Burntrap, who didn't get to do anything, and then Help Wanted 2 did bring Glitchtrap back, but you never actually get to see him. He did get some cool moments as a figure haunting the game and showing up in small ways, like infecting computers in the minigames or sticking a hand puppet of himself out of Bonkabon. but when the only full appearance he had was abruptly being squished by Vanny, who herself had barely any role in Security Breach or Help Wanted 2 until this exact moment, it makes both of them feel like afterthoughts being brushed aside to get their story arc done with, before it got to even be a story. There were glimpses of something really cool with the pieces we were given, but there was no meat in the Glitchtrap sandwich, and that's a real shame. Another thing that kind of waters him down for me is that he's no longer the one-of-a-kind character that he was back in 2019. With Secret of the Mimic's costume design taking very obvious cues from how Glitchtrap looks, it diminishes that alienating factor to his look, as it grounds his aesthetic to a specific origin point. Oh, he's a Murray suit of Springbonnie, most likely. It's nice to have context, but it loses the pizzazz just a little bit. Alongside that, of course, is his more contentious standing within the lore as to who he is. I will always be partial to him being William's actual unabashed self, but from the information we've been given, and comparing him alongside Pip-Bonnie, who shares a lot of similarities with him, I feel more inclined to say he's actually some kind of agony creature rather than the guy. Just makes him feel less interesting to me personally. Granted, there are some hints that make me question this some, namely Scott's comment about the core idea of Glitchtrap.
I always lean sci-fi. I have a tendency to lean sci-fi, even though I try to come back into the roots of the supernatural instead. But I can't help my inclinations to lean sci-fi. So anything that involves possession of AI or possession of machines or circuitry, I love that sort of thing. So I love the idea of Glitchtrap.
So take that as you will. There's definitely something haunted about Glitchtrap, though I'm not sure if it's as much a ghost or a memory. Regardless of my conflicted feelings about what he may or may not be, and how he's been utilized since Help Wanted, Glitchtrap is still one of my absolute favorite versions of Springtrap. S tier. Now, what if we took Glitchtrap and made him slightly better? I'm not sure if this is a hot take or not, but I actually preferred the Dead by Daylight model of Glitchtrap over the original. It's very close, but I just generally prefer the way DVD Glitchtrap looks over the Help Wanted model. He's a little pudgier, I like the slightly different shape of his face, and I love his blacklight eyes. The DVD skin also gives Glitchtrap an actual sense of physicality. Since he is a physical manifestation of the virus, rather than exclusively digital, it restores that idea of him feeling real in a way the original can't accomplish. It also sets him apart from the original since it leans even further into the idea that Glitchtrap is more of a creature than a person. In his idle animations, his entire body shifts around with an air of unfamiliarity with having a real form. The sounds he makes are distorted and feel like a creature trying to approximate the kind of voice William would have given Springbonnie. Sometimes it's completely monstrous, but other times it almost does sound like it could just be him. While possibly not being quite Afton was a factor that brings down the original Glitchtrap for me, I think the Dead by Daylight version playing into that vibe way more is able to spin it into a perk. He is my preferred version of the character, and he slots right into S tier above the original. This one's good for what it is. It's striking, and was very unsettling when we first saw him. His voice being a backwards and distorted was super cool as well. Just can't really go much higher since he's not a tangible entity and never appeared outside of the first Princess Quest minigame. But he gets points for uniqueness. A tier. Yes, MXES counts as a Springtrap. Roll the clip.
MXES, from Ruin. Now, that was a character where, even in just my design of the game, I thought that through, and I came up with that, and I'm really happy with it. I really like that name. It's a really cool name. But now, see, if I didn't have one of those ready to fire off, I might have thought up something like, I don't know, Purple Trap or AI Trap, or just something temporary, and then that would have been the can name. That would have been so much worse than MXES. So,
aside from Scott bringing up MXES in relation to Glitchtrap and Burntrap in that interview to discuss how he wanted more thoughtful names for the three than just blank trap, if you just look at MXES, I feel like it's pretty obvious they're supposed to be a form of Springtrap. They have the same kind of posture, they retain the oversized hands that Glitchtrap and Burntrap have, and they of course have the giant toothy smile that Springtrap is famous for. And, well, they're a digital rabbit, like Glitchtrap. Now, all that justification aside, let's get into MXES properly, because I love their design. While Glitchtrap manifests as a facsimile of an organic body, MXES fully embraces the digital world they're in as a cybercore ghost with circuit board-esque line patterns, and I'd argue they represent the scars on Springtrap and the vest on Glitchtrap. I think that's really cool. I just generally really like the aesthetic of Ruin's AR world, and MXES is a perfect culmination of that style formed into a character. Their face is very interesting as well. It gives the impression of more of a rabbit-shaped head, but actually looking at them, it looks more similar to a stretched-out human head. Their smile and chin especially accentuate this. Something else that's interesting about MXES is their clear similarities to Shadowbonnie, and by extension, the amalgamation in Princess Quest. MXES is an ethereal black rabbit with glowing wide eyes and teeth like Shadowbonnie, and is directly connected to Princess Quest thanks to the tunnel in Ruin leading straight to Vanny's lair. Having these connections help contextualize them a little better, though like usual, the precise end results are inconclusive. The animations MXES has are also very good. They almost never move fluidly. Instead, MXES teleports around in pulsing voxels and assumes a different stance based on their proximity to you. And although they can't directly harm you, they serve as a siren to alert the animatronics to your location. I have played Ruin an unhealthy amount of times, and despite the game's linearity and unchanging gameplay loop, MXES still manages to get a good jump out of me despite me being overwhelmingly familiar with how they operate. Lore-wise, there isn't really a claim I can make that wouldn't ruffle some feathers. I don't think they're F10N4. She has a very distinct identity, personality, and design that I don't think meshes with the evil grinning rabbit we see in Ruin. With the whole MXES #1 thing and Secret of the Mimic, my best guess for now is that the computer in Ruin is another of multiple consoles, and this one has been possessed by Afton or Glitchtrap or something adjacent. That's just the vibe, and that's what makes sense to me. Also, more loosely speaking, the totally innocuous security system that looks a little bit like this completely unassuming security guard gives me an extra hunch that it's related. Take it or leave it, it's not a big deal. Regardless of what they might be, MXES is another of my favorites, and they're going in S tier.
I'm Ruinborn Afton, I always come back.
I was almost safe. I almost forgot he existed while making this, but writing about MXES brought him back. He always comes back. All self-inflicted memes aside, this is a really cool design, and is especially interesting when compared to the final version of MXES that we got. If you asked me, if there was any sort of visual way to represent Afton's spirit, this would be the way to do it. His organic form looking like a skeleton wired together with a mutated human rabbit skull on top is so just creepy. It's genuinely freaky. His head is also particularly interesting to me, as it almost feels like an inverse of what we ended up with for MXES. While MXES has a mostly human-looking head with a touch of rabbit energy, Ruinborn Afton's skull is mostly rabbit-shaped, but with a human forehead. Seeing that Steelwool had this mix of human and rabbit from the start, and spun it more human later on is interesting. The glowing blue core where a heart should be, his far too long fingers and toes, what exists of his animations, and the mere idea of this thing coming after you in Ruin makes this guy genuinely one of my favorites. So the unused model gets to go in S tier. I feel like this could easily sway differently depending on my mood, but this cryptid is just so unique and strange and cool looking that he gets the edge over the top guys in A tier. I am so sorry for what I did to you, Ruinborn Afton. You're still cool to me.
You know, maybe I kind of do like you.
I knew I could get you to like me.
You got me. Now into the vat.
I don't have much to say about Toxic Springtrap. I like his vibes. He's purple and mutated, and I think that's fun. However, the other AR skins I like better than him. Their gimmicks are more interesting to me. Also, Dead by Daylight soups up his design by a lot. It makes him feel like a true mutated corpse glowing with radiation, whereas AR just had his suit strung around bubbling with goop. Original in C, DVD in A.
You burned my house to the ground! My family's dead! What do I do?
He's just Springtrap on fire, and it's awesome. Unfortunately, this being a recolor with missing teeth and cool particle effects can only get him so far. I say this lovingly, he's top of C tier. Someone get him a cup of water, yeah?
Curse you, Perry the Platypus.
I actually really like this one. Having an Aztec Springtrap is a very out there concept, but FNaF AR always liked doing fun, outlandish designs for the characters, and I think the Curse is a really cool makeover for Springtrap. I'm not savvy on Aztec mythology, so I don't know what significance he might have in relation to it, but he's got a fun vibe. It's a very busy design, which might be a deal breaker for people, but I'm down for it. Solid C tier.
All right, get lost, all of you. You're fired. Go on, scram. Get out of here, you moochers. That's right. Keep moving.
You know what? Yeah.
Except you stay.
I love Clown Springtrap. William made all the clown characters. He now gets to be the clown. And he's got a giant hammer, or in DBD's case, a fun saw. He is my favorite of the AR skins. I love his big fat outfit, I love his color palette, and I love how his mask is melded together to form one big smile. That being said, I do prefer the Dead by Daylight version of Clown Springtrap over the original. His outfit feels more tangible and disheveled, his texture work is immaculate, and I adore the corpse having grease paint to give him a Joker-like face underneath the mask. Alongside the physical features, DBD also has the advantage of getting to see Clown Springtrap in action more than AR did. Not to knock AR, it did what it needed to, but this cemented him for me as a truly special variant of Afton. The only downsides are that they had to make him a little thinner for the sake of matching Springtrap's rig, and the mask is not all one form like the AR model was. But he is still all around my preferred take on the skin. Original in B, DBD in A.
Do you have any ibuprofen? I got a headache.
And in the 11th hour of making this video, we've just gotten our first glimpse of Blighted Springtrap, a brand new variant of him for Dead by Daylight. I can't give it a great analysis since we only have one tiny illustration, but I think it's rad. His mask being split open to reveal a monstrous, toothy Afton underneath is really cool, and his brain being exposed is a great touch. Almost reminds me of someone else. Anyway, I don't actually have a good spot to put him since I already assembled the tier list before he was revealed. So I'm just gonna slap him in A tier and hope I like it as much as I'm expecting to. And that wraps it up. I don't really have an exciting finale or plot twist here. That's just all the Springtraps I wanted to cover. If you couldn't tell, I really like this character. Even the lowest ranking ones still hold the honor of being my Blorbo. With the rate FNAF is going now, we'll probably be seeing a lot more Springtraps in the coming years. I don't know if I'll make a follow-up to this, but maybe someday if we get a considerable slew of new ones. But for now, this is my list. I hope I didn't forget anyone. Oh, right, yeah. That's better.